Hello, listeners. Nathan here. As you will hear, this was a cursed episode, which means that we forgot to do a couple of things. So first of all, we forgot to do credits, so I'll just do them here. Unwritten Earth Symposium is a podcast by us, me and Epediah Ravishal. Go us. Our music is by Will Yobst, who you can find online at will.com. Thank you, Will. We are supported by patrons over at patreon.com/unwrittenearths, and you can find links to all of our things at the website unwrittenearths.com, including links to the Discord to sign up for our newsletter, the aforementioned Patreon, and more. The podcast is also on YouTube now for people who like to listen to their podcasts on YouTube. So you can find us, I believe, by searching for Unwritten Earths on YouTube. And there's a link on the podcast show page. If you want to get in touch with us, you can send us feedback through that page. That's at unwrittenearths.fireside.fm, or an email through the link on the website. I believe those are all the credits. If I forgot more of them, I'm sorry. The other thing that we forgot was to assign homework for our next game discovery, but that's okay because we're coming into the holidays. We're going to be taking a couple weeks of our own break while we celebrate said holidays, including not only, of course, Christmas and New Year's, but Epimus, the reason for the season. And so just how perhaps we should tap the brakes a little bit at the end of the semester to get prepared for the coming year, we will take a little break from homework and come back stronger in the new year. All right, I think that's it. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you in 2025. Now enjoy our cursed episode. I've hit record again. Lights are flickering. Who knows? Anything's possible. But yes, we're here. We're recording.
That's our introduction. We're here. We're recording. Welcome to the Unwritten Earth Symposium, a podcast about tabletop role-playing game design, right?
Yeah.
That's what we do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Epediah Ravishal. Across from me is the legendary Nathan D. Paoletta.
That's me.
Mm-hmm.
Hello.
We're two game designers, tabletop role-playing game designers who've made some games over these past few decades, and
and are looking to make some more.
Yeah, we're looking to make some more. But one of the things we're doing is we're trying to trick each other into designing a game that we wouldn't otherwise design.
And you get to hear all about it.
But mainly what happens is that we just talk about game design.
Right.
That's what we enjoy doing.
A couple notes for this episode. Number one, everyone in my household is currently in some level of postnasal drip, so I am perhaps going to be a little snuffly and snarfly. Also, in a wonderful omen, my power went out right as we started recording.
Yes.
And then it came back. So if there's a chance that we'll get enough of an episode, but then my power will go out again.
There's an entire continent between us.
True.
And which is, exciting that we could do this in this day and age with an entire continent between us.
Yep. We shouldn't take that for granted. It's actually pretty cool. Every so often, you have to look at the state of the world and be like, well, everything is bad, but some things are cool.
Some things are cool.
You know what else is cool? Things that people have been talking about in our Discord.
Oh, okay. I mean, that felt like the most open segue possible. I could... Yeah, so we have a Discord, which you're welcome to. If you go to unwrittenearths.com, you'll find a link to it.
Is also a benefit for our patron subscribers. Currently, that is undifferentiated.
Yeah.
There's no particular difference to being in the Discord at this time. However, at some point, we are looking to roll out some patron special things. However, currently, we're welcoming in new listeners, new scholars, as I think we like to call them.
Yeah.
Specifically, we've had enough conversations on enough things that we started making more channels, which was part of our concept, was like not to over prescribe conversational zones and kind of see what people are actually talking about.
Yeah.
So we have some people arranging to play some games, so that's very
Mhm.
exciting. And we have a lot of people talking about Babylon 5.
Yeah, we opened up a generic media channel because there
Mhm.
was a lot of Babylon 5 talk in the introductions channel,
Right.
which is, I mean, that's good. I mean, you need to know when you meet a person, the first thing you should know is what their feelings are about Babylon 5. Like, what is your favorite Babylon 5 season? You know, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
But
Whether you've watched Babylon 5,
mhm, mhm.
one of us has done one of these things. One of us has one of these things, and one of us has the other.
Part of it, I don't think this is my fault. I think Babylon 5 came up because of
Yeah.
other people, but I'm currently for my lunch program. I've watched like an episode or two of Babylon 5 a week now.
Mhm.
Rewatching. I've watched it a couple times before, but if you have ever followed the 200 a day podcast,
Mhm.
you might know that I have a very poor memory for the media that I watch. So that like I'm experiencing it anew
Right.
all over again. I don't have that encyclopedic
Mhm.
brain that like I don't mean that derogatorily. Wait, is derogatorily even a word? I don't
It
know.
is now.
But yeah, but you know what I mean. Like there's a
Yeah,
lot of
that
people.
recall of like,
Yeah,
yeah,
like there are things that I'm a big fan of, and I'll watch them again. I'll be like, oh, I completely forgot about all of this. Like
that's actually
really big things.
because I'm a millennial. I was just reading an article on my phone in bed this morning about vibes. It
Mm-hmm.
was actually pretty. It's in the Guardian, I think. And it was pretty good pop, not pop sci, but like pop sociology kind of stuff,
Right. Yeah.
But talking about like we had a good run facts, but now it's all vibes.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oof.
So maybe subject for a separate discussion. But for media stuff, I too do not generally have really strong recall, except for something I've watched like a million times, right?
Mhm.
About all the details, or like even did this set of events happen in this season or that season, like that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. But I do feel like I have a really good recall of vibe, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind of like, I don't know, designer brain kicking in,
Right.
right? Where it's like, because a lot of my games are genre built, game. I think that's
Yeah.
one of the things that we have, one of our things that we're, for lack of a better term, trying to brand, our
Right.
stuff with.
We need to say something, so let's say that.
Both of us are well known for games that are in a genre and,
Mhm.
for better or for worse, have become touch points in that genre, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think a lot about genre, and genre is vibes.
Yes.
To bring this back to the Discord, talking about media and kind of just having those conversations, like when you're just hanging out with your friends and talking about Babylon 5 because you like it or whatever. That's
Mhm.
all like pretty good grist for the mill, because you get to see what bubbles up through those conversations
Yeah. Yeah.
and articulate what are the vibes that people
Right.
attach to about this kind of show.
It's always interesting seeing what other people enjoy. Quite often, I do agree with people like, "Oh yeah, I like that part. I like that part." But there are just as often, I think that like people will be like, "I like this show because of blah blah blah," and not only do I not didn't get that thing, but like
Mhm.
I also think that blah 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 was not the analysis of that moment or the show in my own head. So I'm
Right,
like,
right.
"Oh, but are you like not to say anyone's wrong because we're like art exists in the conversation between the creator and the audience, right? But yeah, the vibes thing made me think of I had this conversation recently about playing role playing games, and I feel like I'm going to do this excuse a lot throughout our podcast, but like you and I design games to say things, sometimes to say things about genre, sometimes to say things about role playing games.
Mhm.
And then we have those games that we can point to say, this is what I'm saying. And that's what I'm about to do now.
Mhm.
So in Swords Without Master, I can't remember what the text actually specifically says, but I definitely want people to understand that as you play that game, you're going to generate bits and details that you're going to let go.
Yeah.
Like you're making a bunch of bits and details, and as a group, you're going to like not vote, but just as you play, you're going to naturally focus on some, and then at the end, those will be the story. And maybe if you think about all the events that happen, you'd be like, wait, somebody picked up that dagger and it sung to them.
Mhm.
And we never did anything about it. Like, that's fine. Figure it out in a different session or something like that. But the idea that like just let the stuff that doesn't focus you drift off and go with the vibe.
Right.
I think that's kind of well, it's an important thing to how that game works, but I think it's like
I think that's one of those like things where you're mindfully doing that because there's an alignment there between the kind of sword and sorcery that you're inspired by.
Yeah.
And how games work anyway. Right?
Yeah.
So you're able to harness that dynamic in a really strong way in that game. It's kind of similar to like Worldwide Wrestling harnesses the dynamic of we're all at the table to have a good time together, even though our characters might be in competition. Right. That's how games work anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So making an alignment there with the genre, makes that pop.
Yeah.
This actually has some resonance with my homework.
Oh, I'm cool with transitioning to homework at this very moment if we want to.
Yeah, we can go to homework.
Let's do homework.
We've done our homework, to be clear. So let's talk about the things we discovered in our game libraries.
Here's the thing, and this is exciting. We don't know. We did this in secret, off camera. I have a proposed system that would work either in the physical world or in the digital world.
Okay.
Which is to skim through your library before you, and the second game you find that starts with a vowel that you haven't played. I think that's actually kind of an important thing because I just glanced over at my thing and I saw Apocalypse World, and I'm like, we don't need to go into that.
Okay. Just for the change of pace, I think I do want to do this with my physical library.
Okay.
So how about we'll leave it as a surprise as to what games we pick.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. So I don't know what game you're bringing to the table here, and you don't know what game I'm bringing to the table.
Correct.
There is a small but non-zero chance we have brought the same game.
I would be very surprised if we did.
Do you want to go first then?
Okay. So as you heard on our previously on, we selected books from our shelf by this system, which you just heard it.
It's a second one with a vowel that you haven't played.
Which was important because it meant that we both skipped over a couple of good games that we'd love to talk about. But that's because we've played them.
Yeah, exactly. We'll get to them eventually. And
the remit for homework isn't necessarily things that we have not ever played, but I think for now we want to concentrate on things that aren't already part of our pull list, right?
Yeah, that's the fun part right now. There's a lot of games out there that I want to celebrate and talk to you about, but right now, the joy of the homework for me is plumbing the depths of this library. The depths I haven't plumbed in a long time.
Right. All right. So off of my shelf, the second game that started with a vowel that I had not played. I feel like this is a pretty deep cut. This is the Ashcan.
Oh, okay.
There were other playtests, but this was the fully produced Ashcan version of Paul Sega's Acts of Evil.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Are you familiar with this at all?
I am not. I mean, I know Paul Sega.
Earlier this year, I was thinking about Minotaurs, right?
Yes, so, I remember. I thought about Minotaurs some myself.
So we played some of The Clay That Woke. I ran it at Big Bad. It was good. I would say there's cosmic synchronicity here. I'm in my Sega era. I'm Paul pilled. Okay. Acts of Evil is a game that Paul was working on in the 2000s. So this Ashcan was at the Ashcan Front, which was a booth at Gen Con.
Right. Yes.
The date on it is 2007.
I gotta say, because you held up the cover for me, if you held that book up, this image of the cover right now, I would not have guessed Ashcan.
I know, it's funny. The zine culture aesthetic has reintegrated all of these signifiers of the Ashcan from this time.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, tactily it's different because it is spray painted. It's a black, small format book with silver embossed text that just says Acts of Evil by Paul Sega. And then there's this kind of arcane glyph that's reversed out of a spray of green spray paint. And so it is actually spray painted. It's not a spray paint graphic, and it's tape bound.
Like the Huffy Freestyle, each one was unique.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. I don't know how many made, but yes, they were all unique in that way. Okay. So this is a game that existed in this very intentionally for playtesting version. And Paul has, as far as I know, Paul has not released a revised, I have now playtested it, quote unquote, final. Mm-hmm. There's a link on the website, but it's a, it's to tell you that you can't buy the Ashcan anymore.
Right. Oh, okay. Yeah. So this is an objet d'art.
So to position it for the sake of the discussion, this is a game that is intentionally in a unfinished state. And the text has directions and questions to the reader about playtesting unfinished mechanics.
Oh, okay.
This thing is new. I have not seen it play out in full. Mm-hmm. Let me know if it works.
Right, yeah.
With some of the design notes about here's what this used to be, here's why it exists now, here's the hole I'm trying to fill with this revision. So the game is one where the group plays a occlusion, I believe. I always learn new vocabulary from Paul's games, which is pretty exciting. So you're occultists who are pursuing chthonic godhood.
Okay.
All right.
Like you do.
Like one does. It is called acts of evil because that is what you are going to do in order to transcend and achieve that goal. You're not a group, like you're not like a coven or something. Like your characters are distributed through space and time from the outset.
Oh, okay.
And then there's some things about correspondence between like ending up in each other's scenes or whatever. Mm-hmm. Mechanically, there's an end state where one person can get to the point where they can go back to the dawn of history and challenge the microbe godhead that spawned existence to destroy it and become
usurp it. Yeah, that's fun.
Which you might fail at. So there's end states of one person actually does this thing and then you destroy all of your rivals.
Right. Or
one person fails to do this thing and everyone gets destroyed. Basically, like those are the end states. In the manner of most of his multiplayer for the table games, which I say to differentiate from recently, he's been doing solo games with kind of a different focus in terms of the play experience, right? But for these, there's a lot of interlocking mechanical bits, including that the resolution is based on and you might know how to pronounce this. I don't know how to pronounce it off the top of my head. The Lebesgue primes.
Oh, no. Okay. This is fun. I'm looking this up.
Which I think is just the primes, except that one is arguably not a prime. Is that true?
I mean, that's definitely a true thing that people argue about.
Okay.
The last mathematician of any importance who considered one to be a prime is Lebesgue.
Right. So you're rolling pools of D4s, D6s, and D8s, and the primes are essentially the successes. So 1, 2, 3, 5, 7.
Okay, yeah.
So 1 is included, right? As I guess the conceit of calling them the Lebesgue primes. So on your D4s, 1, 2, and 3. On your D6s, 1, 2, 3, and 5. And on your D8s, 1, 2, 3, 5, and 7 are all successes.
In that range, it's just your odd numbers and the number 2.
Yeah. Anyway, so it's one of those very the kind of thing that I'm a big fan of.
Yeah. It's fun. It has a vibe. I know a lot of people are like allergic if you say, "Hey, this is a math thing," but if you're like a Lebesgue prime sounds not only like a math thing, but sounds like an alchemical or an occultish thing, right? Like it's got
all of the mechanics are called, or not all the mechanics, but the things that you roll for in scenes are called equations. That's, what you might in another game call like a conflict roll.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's got a nice feel to it.
There are different equations and each one is coded to who your scene is with. I'm not going to go through with like the details, but
Right, yeah.
oh, an onset. That's your group. Your group is an onset of
Yes.
occultist seekers. There's one thing I just wanted to read out because I was like, this is
Paul.
This is Paul.
Wait, did your lights just flicker?
They did.
Is that what happened?
They did.
All right, good. We'll get as far as we can.
Yeah.
Don't read it out. The entity can hear you.
In a normal human, the visceral capacities of the flesh, voice, imagination, and memory are an expression of the soul within. The event that ushers someone into this occult tradition is the unwilling installation of a zinc ball of thorns in his stomach by an occultist who chooses him as his own spiritual progeny. This ball of thorns, called the Monaster, severs that connection to the soul, freeing the aspects from all constraint. The Monaster imparts the possibility of godhood. So that's the premise. You have a zinc ball of thorns in your stomach that severed your soul from your body, and now you can try to become a god.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That's great. That's wonderful. I love it.
The interesting thing about this game and why it was such a challenge design-wise is that it is not a delight in the horrible capacities of mankind as a catharsis kind of, like, that's not
right.
Actually what it's about. What it's about is you're playing these increasingly inhuman monsters racing to this end goal, which is of destruction. In so doing, you are going to be introducing NPCs, other characters that you need to deal with in order to gain your goals. And the goal of play is for, as you go through the game and when you get towards the end of the game, realizing which of those NPCs is actually the protagonist of the story.
Right.
And having that realization or having that inversion of like, oh, if you're looking at this as a narrative, not like we're the baddies, but like we're the backdrop. And the story is about this person who has been subject to us and then might overcome or might succumb or like whatever. But there's like moments of protagonism that arise out of the soup that then we understand almost retroactively to be, oh, that's who this story is about.
Right.
But that person is never played by an individual player, right? And it's a GM player setup. So there's a GM who's like
describing the world.
Yeah. It's a challenging game to GM because there's some text in here about like you really need to break temporal linkages. Like, if you just do, like, a scene, then another scene, then another scene, like, everything ends up squalid, which I think is a really good word.
Yeah.
You lose that scope. So one of the Arcane Gems, actually, is there's some of the structure for GMs is coming up with a list of transgressive acts and a list of weird locations. And then when you're running the game, if you don't have a better idea or reason, roll on those randomly and build a scene out of it.
Yeah, that's good.
That's pretty good. that's a good technique.
Michael Moorcock had some advice for writing. Advice for writing a novella in a week. Like that kind of advice for writing. Not like he was like, write down these images that are incongruent, like a garden of screaming statues or, that kind of stuff. And then anytime you feel like you're slowing down, grab one of those and just find a way for that to be the thing in it and just go on from there. And it's the same, like that kind of like, rut's not the right word, but if you just need an injection of some sort of fuel for the creativity, having like a thing to just grab into and pull out something at random is great.
In this case, those two things are very specific where it's like a transgressive act because some of the mechanics are about kind of adjudicating like how like much are you transgressing to evaluate whether you should be like raising this stat or lowering it or that kind of stuff.
Right.
So giving context for that, and then locations that are not connected to anything so that you can have these scenes that are dissonant from previous ones.
Yeah.
Like the goal is not actually to integrate that material. The goal is to say, okay, this is kind of like the other side of that coin where it's like, here's a little bit that like now you say, okay, everyone step away from what we were just doing and come over here. And that's create this spread. Cause like as characters progress, you eventually get to a point where you choose whether you break free of time or break free of space. So all your characters at first are bound by All right, we're back on for our cursed episode.
Yeah, welcome back to the cursed episode of the Unwritten Earth Symposium.
As I was just discussing, being separated in space and time,
Yes.
I believe we teased that I might suffer a power outage, and listeners, I did. So This is the next day. As far as I know, we shouldn't have any more gale force winds today, so hopefully we'll be in good shape going forward.
Some of those Earths are not eager to be written.
The thought that I was completing, as you just heard,
that you held on to for 24 hours.
Well, thankfully I have a recording so I could check.
Okay, that's good.
Was that these acts of evil characters, you either become uninhibited by space or by time as like the second level, and then you can get to like a third level and you lose the other one, so then you can do anything anytime, and then that unlocks confronting the Godhead. That all said, whatever momentum I had behind where I was going is gone. So I guess I'll just kind of try and put a button on it with talking about the arcane gems, the extremely arcane gems that lie within on this one. And that was actually tough because it's such a holistic piece.
Right.
Again,
it's hard to untangle a thing.
I feel like this is like a signature Paul Sega joint. And one reason why I've hi Paul, if you ever listen to this, but why I've always found his stuff extremely inspirational to how I try to design is like how tightly integrated, how the workings and mechanics are, but like mechanics, theme, expression, aesthetic,
right?
What it asks of the players, what it asks of the GM. Like, it's such a, again, holistic piece. It's really hard to tease out individual elements as being of a different like priority than any of the others. But I do think that the particular position of this text, which is an unfinished text that has open questions that it's asking the players to consider as a meta level of playing the game, right? I think that's what makes it stand out a little bit. Just something to call out in case I was not clear about it in part one. Acts of Evil is a game that is asking you to do something that games are not good at, which is play an avowedly transgressive, bad, evil character.
Right.
With the goal of a story generating the protagonist that you realize you are the bad guy for.
Right.
And that's not at the top. That's something that's supposed to come out through the process of play. It's even hard to articulate exactly how different that is from like, you play bad guys, but like, it is.
Yeah. Not only are you playing bad guys, but you're playing bad guys that are not the hero of the story in the sense of the good guys, and not the hero of the story is in the sense of the protagonist, like the character that the story is about.
Your process of getting increasingly inhuman is supposed to deprotagonize you as you play. Yeah. And so I guess I'm not surprised that this was a very difficult design goal that I'm pretty sure still has not been achieved.
Again, that gets into like what's kind of cool about things like the Ashcan Front and our current state where people can just put ideas out there. They're like, hey, what if this? I mean, like that's a large portion of what you and I are personally trying to do with Unwritten Earths is just examine other things that could be. I mean, that's what we're doing when we're role playing. What am I talking about? Nobody's special here. This is what role playing is.
Well, I'm sure I've talked long enough. I'm excited to hear about your homework because I also do not know what you selected.
Right. So picked a shelf at random, started going across it, and picked the second one that began with a vowel that I had not played. I had to actually, I think we talked about this online. I had to reject a considerable amount of games that started with a vowel that I had played, and they didn't qualify. And the one I ended up with is technically qualifies. This is called Atlantis: The Second Age.
I don't think I'm familiar with this.
This is 408 pages. So this came out in 2005. In the middle of the sort of D20 world. This is not a D20 game, but like just to kind of place it for those who experience that whole thing.
Mm-hmm. So this is D20 like third edition era, D20 license, like all those games.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So Atlantis: The Second Age, it is basically a descendant of this is put out by Morgan Press. It's the descendant of a 1985 game called, the copy that I'm showing Nathan right now is called The Arcanum. Now you'll note that on this copy it says The Arcanum Fantasy Role-Playing Game Supplement.
Mm-hmm.
This is part of the Atlantean trilogy.
Aha.
Which has, I only have this game for it. I don't remember what the other books are, but I bet you the back, there's a lexicon, which is an encyclopedia, not encyclopedia,
right.
which is, I love that word. An atlas of the Atlantean world, and then the bestiary, right? So this is the player's handbook.
Sure.
Now, I picked up the Arcanum back in the day. I bought this when it came out or shortly thereafter, because of the cover, which I will now describe to our podcast audience. It's a black cover with a red pentagram. There are other flourishes on it, but like...
It's supposed to look like a grimoire.
Yeah.
With like silver, like quarter pieces and rivets and stuff. But yeah.
Yes. In the year of our Lord Satan, 1985, when the Satanic Panic was, full blown forbidden book. I'm going to buy this. This is. I save up my pennies. I pick it up. Never played it, I think. Now we get to the newer version. I am dead certain I have not played Atlantis: The Second Age, but the system in Atlantis: The Second Age is actually the Omni system, which is the same one that they used for Talslanta. Talslanta being another game from back in the day, written by the same guy who created the Arcanum.
Oh, okay.
So they're related back then. Talslanta, but the Omni system showed up in, I think, like the fourth edition of which, but it's an extension of how Talslanta worked. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm probably muddled like when and how things happened between these different games, but they're related to each other. And I have played Talslanta. I have played the Omni system. So the question is, does this qualify? It doesn't matter. I did it for homework.
Right.
So that's where we are. You can mark me off.
It qualifies now.
It technically qualifies because I've never played Atlantis. So Atlantis itself is a fantasy world set in the... Yeah, I mean, like, here's the thing. Don't want to get too much into, like, the mythical past that like kind of comes from the Robert E. Howard and the Conan stuff, the Hyborian Age or whatever. But this kind of shoots towards that with like, I'm going to show again, like we got a map here of like the recognizable continents, but like parts carved out for new oceans. But somewhere in the Atlantic, there's Atlantis, right? Like there's Lemuria's out there. Yeah, Mu is actually Australia's Mu, that kind of stuff. The idea was that like all of these continents had a bunch of different fantasies that you could do, like the sword and sorcery fantasy, or you could do the Tolkien fantasy, or you could do and originally, I think in the Arcanum version, they were very specific about like pick and choose the ones you want to do. I'm always skeptical of that because picking and choosing the ones you want to do, like, okay, is that a job for the game master? Is the game master deciding what to bring to the table, or are the players? And anytime you do that and you're like, oh, I want to do this, but I don't want Peter Jackson style dwarves, then you're going to get nothing but Peter Jackson style dwarves. You put it in people's heads and then they do it. Anyways, okay. I'm not like trying to take a dig at anything here. I'm just like, that's a game design lesson that I have learned in the past. Like, do not offer something up and take it away. I try not to do that with my game designs because I know that stuff really doesn't work at the table, at least the tables I've played at. Anyways, let's just get into the system here. Setting aside interesting stuff, like, I mean, like you can enjoy the setting. I'm not guaranteeing that this stuff doesn't have problematic content. We're talking about stuff that goes back and
that is
in fact
coming out of like Satanic Panic, and then also Atlantean mysticism kind of stuff. Yeah.
So I'm gonna dig into the system here, but I want to say another thing about our Arcane Gems, which is that we're not specifically looking for things that never existed or anything like that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying that this is the game that originated any of these ideas. but these are good ideas that I like. You will see this in other games. So in this game, you're going to roll a d20 to see if you succeed. You have a bunch of modifiers that you add to that roll, and there's a bunch of penalties that are subtracted from the roll. You're not rolling like you might in D&D, where you roll and add and try and beat a number. Your difficulty is something subtracted from your roll. And what you're trying to beat is a set range of numbers.
Sure.
I will actually open to the chart. You roll this d20, you add your bonuses, you subtract your penalties. If you roll a 0 or less, you get a mishap, right? Because if you're subtracting things from it, you might end up with a negative modifier, and you might end up below 0. 1 to 5 is a failure. 6 to 10 is a partial success. So we're starting to feel that in other games. Obviously, everyone's got partial successes these days. 11 to 19 is a full success, and 20 and over are a critical success. None of this will be shocking to anyone else. One thing I do like about this game is that, like, this is kind of a hard-coded thing. There's no wiggle room around it. You don't get a critical success rolling a 20, a natural 20, say, like that. Like, if you have a -1 to your roll in total, you can never get a critical success.
Right. Yeah.
And if you have a +5 to your roll in total, you can never fail. The worst you could do is a partial success. And the game is built around that.
Yeah, that kind of stuff is kind of nice, at least from the GM side, because it's like I can map descriptions onto those contingencies.
This Omni table is not my Arcane Gem. My Arcane Gem exists because of this Omni table, and I'm gonna have 2 of them, and they're fairly similar. The first one is in combat. In this game, you're going to have hit points that you're going to reduce. We're pretty standard. We know how that works. If you roll a full success, you do the damage rating of your weapon, whatever that is. So it's a set number. It's not a thing that you roll separately. If you get a partial success, you do half that. All right, so that's how you get like the random range of damage. If you do a critical success, though, you're going to do full damage like you did, but instead of then like doubling the damage you do or anything like that, it forces your opponent to make a roll to see if they can still remain in the battle, which is wonderful. Like, I think that this is like this lets you subvert a big pile of hit points with a good roll. Like, not just like, oh, we're doing double damage. Like, I did a good roll, and then this thing is out of it. Their roll to react to that, like if you made your critical success, they have to make I think it's like based on their constitution or whatever. The results of their roll are they're out of the battle just completely. They're in the battle, but they're stuck with a pretty bad penalty, like a -5, or they shake it off. And that's great, because then you're like, okay, the hit points are we no longer have to figure out if these hit points are damage that you're doing to the person, even though it's called damage. The hit points are just wearing someone down. It's the critical hits here that are the actual wounds that you do.
Sure, yeah.
You get what's called a critical wound, and those don't heal. Like, you have to spend time or magic to heal them. I like that. I really like the idea of, like, we have 2 things that we're tracking here. Just if the battle is a slog, you're going to get worn down. And then the other is, oh, this person got a hit in, like a good hit in. Now we're in peril.
And it's kind of naturally creating a dynamics where it's like, if you have a real ace, who has like lots of bonuses and is able to shrug off penalties, who just like rolls into the battle, and then they just start taking people out one hit at a time, left and right.
Yeah.
Depending on the character profile, you can scale, like, do we have the big knockdown, drag out, wear them down battle, or do we end up having the heavy hitter go in and we can reasonably assume that he'll end things soon? You can kind of like play around with that.
You build tactics around that, right? Like, you create positions, like, you're like, oh, we're not going to last a fight like a knockdown drag out fight. Let's create a good one shot. Here's our thing. The other Arcane Gem, which is just related the same way, is in they kind of do these neat things. I'm going to do a little aside. This isn't quite Arcane Gem-y, but the game has like these point buy systems, like for creating your character. So the idea is that, like, you want to create a character archetype functionally that's no different from having like just like a unique character, building it with character things. But it's supposed to feel like you're designing a character class that is specific to your character, and which is kind of fun. They do a similar thing for spells. If you're a magic casting character, they have this freeform system for designing spells. That's quite nice. It's sort of like, here's the field of, I think it's called the Order, which is like, I'm an astrologer, so I cast spells that are about the stars. And then you have modes, which are like, these are spells that can move things. These are spells that could do damage, or these are spells that can create illusions, that kind of thing. And some orders have special things that they do in certain modes or whatever. But basically, you as a player pick an order and a mode, and then you start freeform building the spells. But you freeform build the spells before you play. Your character is not freeform building spells. You're just building the unique spells that your character knows.
You get to do the Ars Magica thing, but your character...
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Has to get locked into, like, these are the things that I actually know.
Yeah. And so your character is kind of like doing the same thing over and over again, but like if you've created some neat ones, that's fun. There's lots of fiction that I enjoyed that's of that, including Jack Vance, which is sort of the inspiration for how that got into our hobby in the first place. But every time you cast a spell, you get a -1 to your next, a cumulative -1 to your next spell. So that's how you reduce the number of spells you cast in a day, right? Like the first spell you cast, you're at your prime, and then this starts getting taxing. And what's neat about this is that this critical success means not that the spell is wildly powerful or anything like that. It just means you don't get that penalty for that spell. And again, when we think about how the critical success works on this Omni table, it's because all of your bonuses for casting that spell are better than the penalties to an extent where you're likely to just know the spell well enough that it doesn't tax you. And I think that's great. I think that's a very interesting way of approaching that. Here's the spell that I've spent all of my investment in. It doesn't mean that this spell is super powerful. It just means we can depend on it. Like I could do it over and over and over again without worrying about getting tired or exhausted. For a particular style of magic, I think that's a fun thing. I will be honest, I've not actually, again, these are games we haven't played, and I've not in Talslanta even, which is I have played. I don't even know if I played any Magic users ever. That is a weird thing, because I would think I would be drawn to them. But these games, Talslanta and the older version of this one, the Arcanum, again, this is not particularly helpful to the listening audience, but like, here are the characters. They're like, you've got like an illustration for each one, and as you go through, you're like, I want to be that dude. No, I want to be that dude. Oh no, that's the one.
The illustrations, of course, all dudes.
Yeah. I think there are some women in here, but not many.
Yeah, this is the 80s one that you're showing.
This is the 80s one. Yeah.
Cool.
It's a neat system. I remember really enjoying it back in the day, and it's been a long time since I've looked at it.
Sure.
Like, I mean, it's almost 20 years old now. But yeah. I really enjoy our homework. I love getting the excuse to pull these out.
Even if you can't lie down in bed with a big tome to flip through.
I was complaining on Blue Sky that like this 408 page 8.5 by 11 70-pound book. I can't lie in bed with that open. That'll kill a man.
That's what you need your overstuffed armchair reading time.
Exactly. Yeah. Sit by the fire. Wait for the ghost of Jacob Marley. So we've done our homework.
We
talked about something before the homework. I don't remember what it was.
Oh, we were just talking about the Discord.
Oh, right. Yeah.
How we've been enjoying the growth of the Discord. But that's not what we're here to talk about now. I believe this is the introduction of this particular segment. Epi, what are we doing?
We're going to do 1 hot minutes. 1 hot minute? No, it's 1 hot minutes. Okay.
1 hot minutes? Well, we're going to do 2 hot minutes.
1 hot minute.
Yeah, we're going to do two 1 hot minutes.
Okay, well, we've already stumbled over this long enough. So this is the deal, right? Back in the day, when we go to conventions a lot, you have to sell your game. You get this practice where you get to pitch your game to someone and you witness the moment their eyes glaze over.
Yep.
And so you have to go back and figure out your pitch that doesn't get to that moment. You get a Groundhog's Day, basically. You're at a convention. People just keep coming up to the booth over and over again. And eventually, if you're paying attention and you're doing the work, you hone your pitch to... obviously, the same pitch doesn't work for everyone, but you kind of get a good feel for what's going to work.
Yeah, you refine your arsenal.
Yeah, and then in the end, you end up with a kind of a minute. A minute's actually probably too long for what we're talking about. But you have just a short thing that you could just kind of hook someone with, and then if they are interested, if like they can decide then whether or not they're interested. But you haven't chased interested people away, and then they can ask you questions, and you can get more into it. Now, haven't been to a convention in a while. It makes it very hard to figure out how to pitch the game you're working on, right? You don't have these conversations over and over again, or you don't get to witness someone else pitching your game, because that's also a lovely thing to see. So what we're going to do here is we're going to attempt to pitch games that we're currently working on, Nathan and I, that are I guess I would say these were our works in progress when we started the podcast. So they're not podcast related. They're not related to Unwritten Earths, although they might be in the future. Like, these Earths are unwritten at the moment. So do you want to start? Should I start? I
have one statement, and then I think you should start.
Okay.
So that I can learn what this should be like from you.
Oh, good. Oh, no.
But I just wanted to say that another benefit of running playtests at conventions or in a space where you have like if there's like a game store game night that you can just like run whatever. What I have started to do is when I start explaining like here's what we're gonna do, being like, I also do not yet know how to explain this.
Yes.
So we are also playtesting my explanation right now, right? Like, which isn't work for you, but like I am going to be taking some notes on the words that I am saying that seem to be effective. I need to see when your eyes glaze over, right? Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, definitely. Learning how to explain your game, which is helpful when it comes to also figuring out how you're going to write that text. Sure. And that's something like we should probably dedicate a future podcast to, different ways you're going to have to teach your game, because there are a lot of them. Okay. So this is the game, Sword Point South. It's a fantasy game, nothing special there. You are going to play villagers or people who live around a village who aren't adventurers, who've been sent out on a quest, right? In the middle of the night, in your village, unknown riders whose faces were covered with iron masks rode through, didn't disturb anyone. One of them seems to have dropped a sword that sat lying in the mud of the road to be discovered in the morning, pointing to the south, where there's a range of hills, and beyond those hills are mountains, and beyond those mountains there's a seclusium where the village elder's estranged sister sits and ponders the astral questions. And this village elder wants you to take that sword to her to interpret the signs of the sword being left. This game is, I would say, genre-wise, it is the moment in The Hobbit when Bilbo is just reciting all the food and creature comforts of home that he misses. That's what this game's about. It's about people who are dealing with the fear and misery that comes with adventure, but like fear as in like a forest is dark and so it's scary. And misery being like, I'm getting blisters on my feet. Like, you definitely deal with worse fear and misery, but like in the beginning, that's where it is. This is me probably going over my minute, but let me just tell you a couple things about the mechanics. Well, that sounds really cool. Could you tell me how it works? There we go. Yes. So let me tell you how it works. You're going to have these 6 actions that you're going to roll against, just like how you used to in certain standard fantasy games. Like whether you're going to try and comprehend something or notice something or overpower something or whatever. The number of dice you're going to roll to do this is going to be determined. Each
action has a threshold for how much misery it can deal with before you lose a die, and how much fear it can deal with before you lose a die. So your character is going to have like a comprehend score, and then it's going to have a comprehend threshold, fear threshold of, let's say, 4, and a comprehend misery threshold of, let's say, 2. And what that means is you keep your head you're in when you're afraid, but like if you're dealing with uncomfortableness, if you're dealing with blisters, you suddenly can't think about things as well as I shouldn't say suddenly, but anyways, we're still trying to develop these.
Sure.
So you have these thresholds, and as you play, you gain more fear and misery, and then you're going to want to get rid of them, and those are built in like different ways. You can encourage each other. You can like try and help each other remove their fear or set aside their misery. You have different activities that you do that specifically remove them, or like sitting around the campfire and singing songs, or
or is this when you're when you can bring your dog and everyone can pet the dog?
Exactly.
Where
yes.
this is?
Yeah. One of the characters has a dog, which is just a activity that removes misery or fear because it's a dog. Like you get to hang out with the dog. Anytime you encounter a moment of wonder, you lose a bunch. So if you come across like a temple carved in the side of a mountain with giant skulls or whatever, yeah, it's fearsome, but also it's a moment of awe and wonder. So you immediately lose a bunch of fear and misery before you have to go in. And if you're smart, you probably set up camp before you go back in, so you can have like a little time by the campfire, have a meal, a drink with friends, and get rid of a few more before you do it. That's one part of the game that I think that's sort of the engine that keeps it going. The other, I think, neat thing in the game is that a lot of the rules are designed to not quite reach where we expect them to, right? Like there aren't ranged combat rules for a reason. If you want to do ranged combat, you have to negotiate with your my term for the GM in this game is going to be the old scholar. So you have to negotiate with the old scholar about what you're allowed to, like what it means to be able to shoot or let's sling a stone at someone before they can close the distance between you. And there's a number of different ways that can pan out. There's no guarantee that it'll pan out that way every single time because every situation, every character is different. But every time you level up, you get an oath token that you can spend to turn one of those rulings into a to make sure that you can use that in the future, right? So if the GM's like, if the old scholar says you get a free attempt before anyone else can do anything and they can't do any misery to you, you're like, yes, I'm going to keep using this sling and I'm going to write that down. That is my thing. There's rules for like abandoning those or the old scholar to be like, that doesn't quite, I don't like the way that's working or whatever. But in general, your character develops by you and the old scholar developing the rules that are the exceptions for your character as you go along. So that's it. That is my considerably more than 1 minute and hopefully hot. Tell me about your game. Oh, no, if you have questions, go for it. I shouldn't.
Well, I guess a meta question. Are you interested in using this as a platform for further discussion? Or is this more like we're just kind of
let's do it. Let's
showing off what we're working on?
I mean, this is what it would normally be as you try and develop your 1 hot minute, right? We don't have fully developed 1 hot minutes yet. So we're trying to role play the experience.
Well, yeah, I guess what I'm interested in is like, that all sounds cool. You're still working on it. What are you still working on? Where's your creative energy currently trying to work something out? Right.
So the game is, we've been talking quite a bit about vibes.
Right. We were talking about vibes.
And this also plays into the stuff you were talking about with Acts of Evil, right? This game is meant to leave things open for people to want to hack it as they play. Like I need you to hack it while you play. And you will. Like you'll just be like, hey, I'm trying to think like an example of one of our play tests. They just got ambushed in the middle of the night. They recovered from it, but then they were like, oh wow, we brought on a whole lot more fear and misery because of that. Can I say a prayer before we go to bed to try and set people at ease? Will that remove any? And that's great. And like the old scholar could be like, yes, everyone lose, so much fear, so much misery or whatever. like that naturally kind of comes up. You'll ask, can I do this? And there's not going to be a rule there for it. And so the old scholar has to come up with it.
Systematizing the, you can do anything, just ask the GM.
Yes, exactly. And what I want to do now is, because this is going to be a scenario that has, it's like the rules with a scenario. This isn't a generic system. And that scenario is going to just be full of a bunch of ideas. Basically, the scenario itself is just going to present a lot of ways to do these things so that you can be like, oh, actually, I kind of liked it how we did it in this moment. Like everything you encounter is going to have like a different way of handling these. It'll say it like in the encounter, this is how this will play out. And a lot of this comes from my experience with Tunnels and Trolls back in the day, where just making tactical decisions would greatly change the battlefield. So you would look at a number and just say, this is impossible. We can't beat this number. Okay, let's change what we're doing.
Yeah.
Anyways, so my creative focus at the moment is coming up with a bunch of these hacks that are not the rules, but ways you might want to.
Is the idea that they're kind of like examples, like kind of models, but also you could just use them if it fits?
Well, they're basically going to be like, for instance, you start the game at level 1, which means you're going to have one of those oaths. And I don't want to like be like, you haven't played the game yet, so figure that out. So I have a chart you roll on for your first oath.
Oh, sure.
And this is your starting character. So those are 36 different ways. Sorry, you're rolling 2d6 as a percentile.
Yeah.
So those are 36 different ways to break the game. Like one of my favorite examples is that you might roll up an old villager who's like, I'm not coming back from this quest. So you, at the beginning of every lethal roll, can turn 2 fear into 1 misery. You've embraced the fact that you're not coming back from the so you can abandon fear, but you still deal with more misery than everyone else because you're old, right? Like, and so this is like okay,
it kind of gives you your like, this is my character's thing, like kind of from the jump.
And so they're all going to be things like that. But yeah, the scenario is just like a lot of things that you can kind of find or discover, and they just say, for now, just work it like this. And if that works for your group, then it does. And if it doesn't,
come up with something else.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And you might eventually abandon that first thing. You might be like, I don't like this. I don't want this to do these things. So
cool.
Yep, I'm excited. So that was A Sword Points South, another title with sword in it, which won't cause any confusion. Speaking of
title confusion,
tell me about what are you working on?
Well, I am working on my still untitled dark fantasy Fate game, which I can't call that because I don't want Fate to be in the title because it's not a Fate game.
Right.
But this is my Elric meets Earthsea epic fantasy game that I've recently been poring over my notes from the last playtest and starting to do some revision based on those. So this is, I think, a much more protean state of game than the one that you're working on.
It's an earlier, well, not earlier, because it is born from, I'm sorry, I shouldn't interrupt. You're doing your thing.
Well, I just mean in terms of like the pitch and everything, it's kind of like pretty much all I have still is like the high concept, which is that you are playing these epic characters, world bestriding, that have great fates in store for them if they choose to take them. In play, you may pursue the fate that is laid out before you, or you may seek to change it. Those are open questions. But no matter what, things are going to, like, great deeds will be done and great changes will be made in this world. And this world is the Shifting Lands, which is a kind of semi-Hyperborean situation. They're just called lands. They could be a kingdom. They could be an archipelago. They can be the space between worlds. Like, it's a large definition space for what a land is. But they do have boundaries. You're either in a land or you're not. And so through play, the nature of these lands and their relationship to each other can be changed by your characters.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the stories that you're going to be telling, right? The narrative arcs. There's also visible change in the world that isn't purely narrative, handling of stuff. So that's to try and create some of that epic feel. The goal of the game is to get that experience of going through a big epic fantasy series, but actually be able to play that in like 3 to 6 sessions instead of, years and years.
Right.
That's kind of the high concept. Mechanically, it is hailing from Worldwide Wrestling, so I'm adapting those mechanics into this form, which is fun, but also a challenge. And yeah, that's where the game is at. Development wise, I'm in the middle of some revisions. Mm-hmm. So I guess, what are you interested in hearing about?
You're telling me as Elric meets Earthsea, which are my knuckle tattoos.
Right.
Like, so that's right in my zone. That hits me right here. But then you're like, this is hailing from Worldwide Wrestling. Mm-hmm. How does pro wrestling turn into
sure.
Elric meets Earthsea?
It's coming from, this is actually from an idea from my friend Dev. I think you know Dev Perkins. Who back a long time ago was like, hey, I had this idea, and then we didn't really end up getting anywhere with it. But instead of booking the matches, your characters, like essentially fates, are being booked by the gods.
Okay.
So that's like the origination kind of concept. And so what I'm translating here is the idea that there is a predetermined ending that we want to see as the audience.
Right.
When you're playing, you have agency to go along with it or to swerve it and change it at the risk of some potential danger. Right. And then the other mechanical stuff kind of gets translated into the genre. So the other gimmick, if you will, is that I am attempting to make it a diceless set of moves, except for when you defy fate. When you defy fate, that's the only time that you roll dice.
That's fun. That's fun.
But other than that, it's diceless. But like, you have your stats, those translate into more like sword and sorcery-ish stuff. Instead of momentum, you have ardor, which is, your desire to do great things. And instead of the audience track, you have glory. And so you're doing certain outcomes are going to give you glory. And as you gain glory, your name goes out because you become more famous across the lands. And you can, like in Worldwide Wrestling, you eventually get to the top of the card and you have the top spot. In this game, there's a maximum glory in which you take the crown. And then you're kind of like you're the Dragon Reborn from Wheel of Time. Like everyone kind of, either directly or kind of through folklore or whatever, like knows who you are, right? That's what having the crown means. But you can be deposed from having the crown. Only one can hold the crown.
Like in a ladder match, or
right. Well, like in there can only be one champion, right?
That's good.
So all those like mechanical things all map. Yeah. You have ardor that you can use on your moves. Your moves are going to generate certain outcomes, some of which will get you glory, et cetera, et cetera.
I don't know if this is like just a personal, the way Epi's mind works, but like when you said the booking of the matches is the gods booking your fate. Yeah. When you said that was the thing that you should have heard the cha-ching sound of my, like that was that was
sure.
If you were pitching this at me in at Gen Con, where I'm jaded, I've seen, like, I've gone through hundreds of booths, and you said that would be the part where I would just, without knowing it, I would have my wallet in my hand and handing you the cash.
Oh, I appreciate that. One question is like how much, because I don't want it necessarily to be you have to know about Worldwide Wrestling. Like, I do want it to have its own identity.
I don't think it has to like lean into that so much. I just think
that
like
way of explaining it is pretty strong.
In my diagram
Sure.
of, like, because I think you probably will find that, like, when you talk to someone, you'll find
Yeah.
out if they're wrestling fans, and then you could be like, okay, we're gonna go down this angle.
Yeah.
And if they're not, then it's fine. They don't need to know how the sausage is made.
Right.
But yeah, I'd love the way that I see Worldwide Wrestling mapping into this. That's all I'm saying.
Part of the fun of it is like doing that and playing around with something I know really well, but also like finding the little ways to have like sneaky little jokes and stuff, just like how the mechanics work, which is kind of fun.
And I do love the rolling dice just for when you're defying fate. Like that's hot.
Like when I ran the playtest, like that was a like, oh cool, like you're saying, when you're explaining something, you can see when something hits. I'm like, oh, that hit.
Yeah.
Like that idea hits. Yeah. Hold on one second. I think I might have one visual aid.
We're cursed again. I'm being Blair Witched. All right, so this episode obviously is cursed. What had happened is that Nathan's audio cut out for me, and the video froze. And then when it came back, he was just standing in a corner of his office, facing away from me. And I don't know if it froze that way or if that's.
I may be full of lies. I may not have a visual aid.
There's a lovely Easter egg for you when you edit this episode.
Oh, good.
We're cursed.
Sorry, I walked away to find a visual aid, and it took me longer than I thought.
Visual aids being, the bread and butter of podcasts.
Right. Well, so I wanted to talk about the specific thing that I'm looking at right now for development.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things. This game still needs a lot of work. One of the main things that came up in the playtest was that there's a tension between. I kind of want to be a little agnostic about whether the characters need to interact. Like, there's some ways in which it could be a game where where it's like parallel storylines, etc. I don't really want it to be a game where like you're all in a group together. Like, that's not not really the style that I'm going for. So it's like, what is the relationship between the characters? And one of the core mechanics that is kind of the unique thing for this is known futures. So a lot of the mechanics give you the opportunity to make a known future. And then this is similar to motifs from Swords Without Master. The known futures kind of subsystem is all about generating pieces of fiction that then have opportunities to be reincorporated, but they're not they don't have to be, right? That was definitely something that was like, when it hit, it felt really good, but there's still some work to make that stuff align so that it is more happens more reliably. But then one of the other things was like, this game does not have heat or like relationships from Apocalypse World. Like it doesn't have character bonds of any kind from character creation. Because
they may never meet, they may never have anything to do with each other.
And part of the idea is you can potentially be from the same land, and in that, and so that's where you start to see some correspondence. But like in the playtest, people were like tried to pull their stuff together, and like that's pretty natural.
Yeah. You want to do that. You want to build on what other people have said, and
yeah. So something that I am working on now is trying to create weak ties instead of like strong ties for characters, right? And using the known futures to do that. So there's 6 play sheets. There's 6 characters. Actually, this is from an earlier version that then I dropped some of this stuff. But anyway, one of my play sheets that I have just has them just arranged in a circle, in an opposed circle, right? So that each one is across from another character and then is next to 2 other characters. You seed the game with some known futures, and right now it's just the GM being like, here's some of them, but they're based on the playbook. So like, if you're playing, if I can remember these off the top of my head, but like if you're playing the Monarch in Exile, there's a couple known futures, and then right now the GM picks one and is like, okay, so this is on the board, and like on the board is something like, I will have my revenge on those who bespoiled my land, or something like that.
Right.
That comes from the presence of the monarch in exile in the game, but that future doesn't have to go to them. It can go to anyone if it ends up being relevant to a thing that's happening. And so what I'm doing right now is working out what I'm calling crossing the star, where instead of the GM just picking them, it's a kind of a get to know the characters at the beginning thing, but then you pick one of the known futures from the character that is across you in the star.
So for the listening audience, the circle has these 6 characters equidistant from each other, so you can make a 6-sided star with that. There would be you kind of form a triangle with 2 other characters.
Yeah. So I'm working out exactly how that, because that needs to do that needs to have a way that it devolves depending on what characters are in play, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, you can do 5-pointed stars, and if there's only 4 characters, you just do
who's opposed.
Yeah, and 3 characters, you're back to a triangle.
Yeah, I think you could play with 2. You could play it one-on-one. I think 2 characters is probably good anyway. But the point is, so now I need to kind of go through and generate some of these seeded futures for people to pick from. But the idea is then you have some level of, you've thought about the other character for a little bit. And I think that will naturally lead to people looking for those opportunities to do things that relate to each other. But I don't think this game needs or would benefit from like strong like relationship mechanics.
Right. Yeah.
So that's an interesting tension that I'm trying to work out. But I like the metaphor of crossing the star to like be like, this is how we get some of the known futures into play. Tell us about your person, and then tell us what your options are, and then another person picks from those options.
Yeah, I dig it.
Yeah, so we'll see. All right, so those were our hot more than a minute.
Yeah. So like we didn't know what this segment was going to be like going into it. I like the segment quite a bit because it got us a chance to just vocalize what we're working on, because that's always an important thing. Yeah, maybe it'll be an ongoing joke that the hot minute is always longer than a minute.
We'll see. There is one other hot minute that we're going to spend, but I believe that that's going to be a plus expenses minute where we talk more about this pet crimes game.
Right. So we want to create a little game for the patrons. And that came out of the discussion in the last episode of the last episode of Unwritten Earths. We had some discussion, which we won't go into now because you can go listen to it, but about like mounts and animal companions and things like that. That led to some ideas that we then further developed a little bit in the plus expenses being our patron only after hours.
Yep.
Basically, we record plus expenses immediately following recording this, and it's just us kind of cooling down and just like spitting out other ideas that we had or whatever. And that got us to a game that's about putting pets on trial for their crimes, where you have to convince a jury of their peers, so their peers being other pets, that they are innocent or guilty of doing something. Our Discord has quite a few good examples of in real life pet crimes. I mean, the internet's full of them, but like we've been generating some pet crimes from our scholars over on the Discord. And let me tell you, these pets, they're crimes. But right now, this is just early days for pet crimes, so we'll save that.
We'll save that for plus expenses,
and we'll bring it out into Unwritten Earths once if and when it becomes a
something that has more to talk about.
Yeah.
Let's wrap up this cursed episode. However, this does we are starting to get a little more interesting juice to this question. Epi, have we made a game yet?
No, not yet. We're getting there.